Colts finished 8-9. Another year of being mediocre. If it wasn't for the Steelers, the Colts might lead the league in being mediocre. However, I think the NFL could do a better job.
Now, he fulfilled his commitment, but look, who's got it better than us? Nobody. Nobody. And with the news of Nick Saban retiring,
there's one game on Friday, 3 games on Saturday, and they got the game on Friday. Just 2 years ago, Super Bowl champion. I mean that just gives you chills. Patrick Mahomes on the up, there's nothing like the atmosphere in the playoff. I don't care if it's way up here, way up there. There's nothing like the atmosphere in the playoff. But if you're getting paid this amount and you're not producing this because that's what you're getting paid to do, then you open yourself up to a can of worms. And that's just the way it is. And I quote, "I have never seen a group waste more opportunities, talent, and money more than this group." Said from our very own Pat McAfee. On who else but the Colts. This is another episode of the Nick Solomon Show, the Sports Charter Podcast. And on today's episode, guys, grab your popcorn. It's all about the Colts, and the Colts some more. Why are they even worth making an entire podcast video over one subject? Because, like it or hate it, the way this season has unfolded has unfortunately, or fortunately, but mostly unfortunately, brought us to this very episode today. Let's dive into it. So, just a quick overview of the season, just from start to finish. What we sort of thought coming into the season was we have a QB who's coming off of a surgery, a major surgery on his shoulder and his throwing shoulder. And his rehab went on schedule. He didn't participate much in the off-season minicamps, but was full go, ready to go come training camp. And this year, unlike his rookie year, there was no doubt in anyone's mind who the starting quarterback was going to be. The off-season moves from the franchise was they brought in a veteran QB, Joe Flacco, a quarterback coming off of a Comeback Player of the Year award from the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns didn't want to obtain him, so he became a free agent, and the Colts scooped him up to be a veteran presence in the locker room. But in no way, shape, or form was anyone's idea or expectation that Joe Flacco should suit up in any game whatsoever except for injuries. The narrative coming into training camp was how dynamic could the QB and running back combo be, Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor combo be. Jonathan Taylor missed majority of last year, came back on second half of the year, didn't really get his footing until the last few weeks of the season. Anthony Richardson missed, 12 games last year, 14 games last year. I think 14 games last year. They were on the field for one snap, I believe, and that was in a preseason game, I think. So there's anticipation looking to what Jonathan Taylor could do, to what we saw him at the tail end of the prior season, and what Anthony Richardson's running ability could be this year as well. So that was all highly anticipated. The roster construction was essentially built from the inside out. The entire focus through the draft was in the trenches, on the offensive line and the defensive line as well. And we were sought to have a really, really good defensive line. With the 15th overall pick in the NFL draft, we selected Latu, the first defensive player off the board, and obviously the first edge rusher off the board as well. And was that a glaring need that the Colts needed with the 15th overall pick? I say no. It was not. If they were going to address the defensive end, that it should have been a corner. Well, they went defensive end. Strengthen what is already a strength. We're going to win by making sure your QB cannot get a single snap off or can't get into any sort of rhythm. We're also going to control the line of scrimmage in the run game as well. And so they brought in Roquan Davis to help beef up the defensive line and sort of strengthen against the run. So those were sort of the anticipated headlines coming into the season. And the biggest thing that everyone was looking was to see if Anthony Richardson could improve his arm talent, his accuracy throwing the ball, his IQ on the field, and his overall leadership, and how of a leap would he take going from his rookie year to year 2. To start the season, there were some roller coasters, and that's honestly what was kind of expected, some roller coasters. But no one knew how those roller coasters would come to be. Started off the year okay. You could tell that this was going to be mainly focused on the run game. However, there was a lot of passes being thrown, a lot of complex passes being thrown. And Anthony Richardson made you scratch your head the first half of the season. He couldn't make the layup. In fact, that was a theme that carried on throughout the entire year, is that any yards, 15 yards or in even, it would be wildly inconsistent and leaning on not being completed. And so that just made you scratch your head, because those are the easy throws. Now, the throws 40 plus yards down the field, he was throwing haymakers. One of the accurate deep ball throwers in the league. His first deep pass of the league happened in Game 1 versus Houston. Off of one leg, throws it 60 plus yards for a touchdown to Alec Pierce in stride. Absolutely amazing. So you saw flashes. And then as the season progressed, boy, were there letdowns. You saw a lack of leadership. You saw a lack of playmaking. You saw dumbfounded play calling on both sides of the ball. You saw more inconsistency than what you thought you would get. And you saw a lack of wins. The Colts ended the year 8-9. They absolutely had an opportunity to get into the playoffs versus lower level competition. And they lived down to their competition and did not meet expectations. I look back throughout the season and I am just I look back at our 8 wins. And how did we even get to 8 wins? Pretty much just fed on a lot of bottom feeder teams. The only good team that we beat, who happens to be a playoff team, was Pittsburgh. Week 5 of the season. That game ended up being closer than what it should have. However, for a majority of that game, we were kicking their asses. For a majority of that game. That's the only quality win on the Colts schedule. You know, they have wins versus Tennessee, versus Jacksonville, versus Chicago. Those are the only ones that really scream that come to mind. Versus Miami. Miami is probably the only other decent mediocre team that they beat. Miami ended up being 9-8, I think, or they might have had the same record as the Colts at 8-9. Other than that, I mean, I can't really think of any other teams. They played a ton of close games, but they couldn't finish. That was another thing. They just couldn't finish. The defense would give whatever it wanted, okay? The defense couldn't stop a cold if it wanted to all season. It had flashes. First half of games, they could have been a top 10, top 5 defense. But no. They would let whoever and whenever a quarterback was standing back there have career days. It didn't matter if it was Jared Goff back there or Malik Willis. They were having career days. Drew Lock threw for over 300 yards and 5 total touchdowns. The number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft at the time, that's how bad of a team the Giants were. And Drew Lock threw for over 300 yards. And they put up 45 points on the Colts defense. I'm not saying our defense was world beaters or even top 10, top half of the league. But the Giants offense was averaging 14 points at that time. And the Colts defense allowed 45 points. Basically let them march up and down the field. Couldn't stop them. And that led to where we're at now. And the questions that are going into the offseason. As I said, Colts finished 8-9. Another year of being mediocre. If it wasn't for the Steelers, the Colts might lead the league in being mediocre. All right, they've got shelves of trophies for mediocrity. For the better part of since Manning left, that's what we've been. We've got a few great years of Andrew Luck, but even when Andrew Luck was quarterback here, we had 2 straight 8-8 years too. We just love drafting anywhere between 11 and 20. That's no man's land. At least if you suck, there's the promise of a really good high draft pick that could turn around your team or start the building blocks to get there. If you're in the 20s or later, or 18 or later, you're a playoff team, so what does it matter? You made the playoffs. Nah. This team liked swimming around 11 to 17. That's where they feel great at, okay? That's where they're comfortable being at, okay? They're not bottom feeder team, but they're not contending anytime soon. And that's what the most frustrating part is that the talent is there. The individual talent is there. You feel like you made good moves. You feel like you drafted in positions that would help your team. When it comes to Sundays, it never clicked consistently enough to really say, here come the Colts. In fact, teams welcome the Colts. Teams welcome to face the Colts on the road. Mediocrity. That's our Colts. It left with questions at the QB because a little over halfway through the season, Anthony Richardson decided to tap out of a game because he was tired. So there's questions of leadership from our QB because that is something that should never occur on any stage. Pros, collegiate, high school, youth league. The number one thing they teach you in youth league is when you get knocked down, how do you respond? How do you get back up? But you get back up. You can reset, you can refocus, you can rework, but you can never quit. questions on leadership from the most important position on the field and the face of your franchise too. Defense. Boy, where do I even begin? Basically, bottom fifth of almost every category in defense. Bottom fifth. Like I said earlier, couldn't stop anything. Let any quarterback get anything they wanted on the field throwing the ball. Start off the season horrendous in the run game. Horrendous. Still ended up bottom 5. It's not like it got any better. There were moments, sure. Individual runners may not have gotten over 100, but collectively over 100-yard games. There needed to be change because you couldn't trust this defense to stop anything. When you needed a clutch moment, they wouldn't give it to you. Again, there were moments in every single game where you thought, here it is. The offense wasn't doing anything for 95% of the year. You had to rely on your defense. You could rely on them for 2 quarters. But after 2 quarters, the floodgates were going to open. And there's nothing that they could do to help you. The offense had to bail the defense out. And the offense did shit. Even when the offense came alive for the 5% of games, defense was crap. There was never a complete game this entire season from the Colts. State of coaching, I think Shane Steichen is a good mind. It's not all his fault, but it's not all of the individual players' faults as well that's out there. Needed a change, and the biggest change was on defense, and that's exactly what the Colts did on Black Monday, is what they call it, Black Coach Monday. They fired defensive coordinator Gus Bradley. Needed a change. 3 years, and the stats of our defense have decreased over his 3-year tenure being with the Colts' defensive coordinator. It needed a change. I like our individual players, but the scheme itself just wasn't working. Wasn't doing anything. General manager. I like Chris Ballard. I like his demeanor. I like what he tries to infuse within the Colts organization, the standard in which they want to be at. But he's got to hold more people accountable, starting with himself. I mentioned that he picked up a backup veteran QB. I mentioned that he picked up a backup defensive tackle in the offseason. Didn't really do anything else. There were other glaring needs, and there were free agents available this past offseason to go out and get that. And the Colts have the cap space to do so. But for the most part, we just ran it back with the same team that we had a year ago. And that team was 9-8. And basically it was, hey, if we had a different coordinator, added a piece here, piece there, we're contending. And it went in the opposite direction. And I can't believe I'm about to say this as well, but the culture of the Colts organization. What is it? Where is it? You've got veterans in the locker room questioning different things. You got veterans starting to be outspoken. It's not like that doesn't happen across the league, but you don't really see that happen with any Colts player. So, it was really interesting to see that and to read those things and to hear those statements. You just see guys look disinterested. Now, it wasn't... As far as the players are concerned, there were some people that, stepped up to the plate. There were some people that just absolutely disappointed you. And some of the players who were negative, I'm going to have to say Michael Pittman. I love his point of the catch aggressiveness. I love how he's a type of receiver that is going to go over the middle. And predominantly that's where a lot of his catches came from this year, was over the middle. You know, he's an outside receiver, but he will go inside. He's a tough receiver. Too many drop balls, man. Too many drop balls. Not that what I'm accustomed to seeing from you. Catchable balls from you too. Where were you at this year, man? Tackling was absolutely atrocious by every member outside of the defensive line. Linebackers, safeties, corners. Your tackling was pitiful, to say the least. We led the league in missed tackles this year. The tight end group as a whole. Did we even have tight ends? Averaging 2 catches a game, probably. We have 4 tight ends on the roster. Forget game changers. Were you even in the game? Backup running back. It was Jonathan Taylor or bust, basically. Jonathan Taylor or bust. Trey Sermon's our backup running back. Tyler Goodson, third string running back. Anytime any of those two were in the game, you kind of knew that it was going to be passing down. But even if it wasn't and they were given the ball, they did nothing. I mean, there was no threat. And I'm not saying that a backup running back needs to be threatening, but you need to give spells to our main running back where the team can still trust you for a drive, can rely on you for a drive. Because most of the time, those were 3 and outs. Lastly, Matt Gay. Find another team. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't find another team, actually. I don't want to come at you and say that you're terrible, that you don't deserve another chance. But I will say you don't deserve another chance for the Colts. You should have been gone halfway through the season. If I can't rely on you from 50-plus yards, I can't rely on you. There's plenty. Majority of the kickers out there were sliced in 50-plus yard field goals. Okay? Good for you that you were pretty accurate, 49 yards or less. Good for you. If you're in a 35-yard line there, you basically relegated us to go for it in 4th down. Now, those are the type of, 40 to 35-yard range in opponent's territory where you might think about going on it on 4th down if it's close enough. But if it's not, you must force the Colts' hand to go for it because you couldn't be trusted to hit a 50-plus yard field goal. Not that you didn't have the leg, you don't have the accuracy, man. And you cost us a lot of points. I don't think there were games in which it came down to you off the top of my head, but your influence could have greater influenced how that game ended up. Simply can't rely on you, man, from 50-plus yards. Get out. You shouldn't have just... There are plenty of away games where I didn't even want him to get on the plane ride back. Find your own way home, dude. Matt Gay, you're big negative. Having said all this negative, it wasn't like every aspect of the Colts season was a disappointment. They did win 8 games for what it's worth. There were some shining spots in that. And I want to talk about the biggest shining spot, the MVP, if you want to call it, of our team, of our season, Alec Pierce. I mean, give it up for him. If there was a most improved player award in the NFL, like there is in the NBA, it should go to Michael Pittman Jr. Hands down. Dude led the league in yards per catch. 22 and a half. A full yard more than second place. Also led our team in touchdown grabs. And this is Alec Pierce, who I had questions coming into the season on reliability of catching the ball. Just catching the ball. I thought he kind of had the case of the drops. That he didn't want the ball in tough moments. Dude proved me wrong this year. any ball launched downfield, it was going to Alec Pierce. If you're in a tight window, just chuck that thing. Alec Pierce is down there somewhere. Absolutely was a stud on the outside, running go routes, running deep crosses. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And deserving, honestly, in my opinion, to get a second contract, which I think if he's not up this year, it's next year. And I think he's deserved an extension. Josh Downs was an absolute dog. My favorite probably receiver on the Colts is Josh Downs. The dude is amazing. Almost like TY 2.0. It was amazing how clutch Josh Downs was. And how great footwork he had as well. Jonathan Taylor, for what it's worth, was a highlight of this year. Dude ran for 1,400 yards. I'm not just... Yes, there were 17 games, but okay. Minus 110 yards off of that. Still ran for 280 yards. 290 yards plus. 1,290 yards plus. Regardless if you missed some games, that's... For the games you were in, you showed out. You showed up. Now, he made the most unforgivable play of the season, dropping the ball before crossing the goal line in a pivotal game. You'll always have that on you for the rest of your life. For the rest of your career and the rest of your life. But that notwithstanding, he still had a hell of a year, man. Top 5 running back in the league. Top 3 maybe running back in the league. You balled out. And also DeForest Buckner, man. Stalwart up front. 5th season on the Colts now. I mean, continuing to say why you are a top 5 at your position, in my opinion. Absolutely hands down and incredible. So, I mean, that's my list of positive people. Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Jonathan Taylor, and DeForest Buckner. It's 4 people. You got a roster of 53. 4 people you could say stood out. Well, there's some people that were good. Some people had okay seasons. Some people's seasons that were a little bit let down. Only 4 people. That just continues on to how of a question mark, a head scratcher season this was. So, going now into the offseason, looking ahead into the 2025 NFL season, some of the needs of the team, roster-wise, I think we, in no particular order right now, we need a corner, a linebacker, tight end, a flash edge rusher, and a kicker. Those are my top 5 needs heading into the 2025 season. Whether you address them in the draft or in free agency, those are my top 5 needs for the roster. Coaches-wise, we just need to do defensive staff. Yes, we got rid of defensive coordinator, but more than likely, you're not going to bring in another defensive coordinator without him wanting his own guys for certain position groups. So, new defensive staff coming in. So, a year ago almost, I talked about the offseason of the 2023 Colts and looking ahead to the 2024 season. And part of that was talking about the schedule that the Colts played this past season and how I thought how difficult that schedule would be. Take a look at this clip from almost a year ago. Percentage is just over 50%, which isn't bad. The Colts have the 11th easiest schedule next year. The 11th easiest. So that doesn't sound pretty bad. But let's take another approach, another look at this, okay? Just to give you a little bit more deeper stats, out of their 17 opponents, 6 have played in the playoffs. 6 out of 17 are playoff teams. Okay. 11 are 7+ win teams. 11 out of 17 have won at least 7 games. That right there is tough. That means majority of your opponents, every single time, there isn't going to be any pushover. There isn't going to be any easy ones. It's going to be a game. It's going to be a battle. To go one step further, ridiculous. Now, the league as a whole, if you look at all the records, all divisions, all teams did pretty well at home and the tougher games on the road, because you should always go 8-0 at home or 9-0 at home. It's home field advantage. And it's understandable to Houston. I mean, that's a really tough home stretch or home schedule. There's really no guaranteed wins in that. I mean, our easiest opponent is New England. And we play at New England. And you know the Colts' history at New England. At the end of the day, what would my prediction sort of be for the Colts next year? I mean, looking at the schedule, I'd have to go 9-8, which is the same exact record. As I thought, this was going to be a very tough schedule. But coming into the year, I thought that they would still have some winnable games just because of the opponents and where they're playing the opponents. But it lived true. The strength of schedule percentage includes all of your games. And fortunately or unfortunately, that's a little skewed because we have the Tennessee Titans and Jacksonville Jaguars in our division. That's always going to drop the winning percentage because they haven't done well the last couple of years. And so that is essentially where I'm headed into this year, is the first outlook into the schedule for the 2025 season. Yes, the Colts know exactly who they're facing this upcoming year. They know exactly who they're facing at home and on the road. However, until May, we will not know when we're facing an opponent and at what time. But you do know who and where. So looking at who they are facing next year, as you see and as you know here, they have Houston, Tennessee, and Jacksonville, our 3 divisional opponents, home and away. Home games against the Dolphins, the Cardinals, the 49ers, the Raiders, the Falcons, and the Broncos. Away games versus not only our division, but against both the Los Angeles teams, the Chargers and the Rams, the Kansas City Chiefs, Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Seattle Seahawks. Those are our home and away games. That is what we know. But if you're really looking at that schedule again, that's an even tougher schedule than this year. So if you just do the onset and just say the entire schedule, strength of schedule percentage, what that would equal to about 46.4%, 0.464. It's a pretty easy schedule, to be honest, just having that number. It's winnable schedule. But again, that number is skewed by the fact that we had a 3-14 Tennessee Titan team and a 4-13 Jacksonville Jaguar team. On top of that, we play them twice. So if you take away just the fact that we're playing Tennessee and Jacksonville, on top of we're also playing the Raiders as well, who is another bottom feeder team who was 4-13 this year. Take away those opponents, and it automatically brings us up to 0.520%. It's a huge swing from 0.464 to 0.520. It's a huge swing. It's essentially you're playing against 9-8 teams every single week. 9-8 teams. Just by taking away those 3 opponents, those 5 games. That's how tough the rest of our opponents are. We're playing against 6 current playoff teams and 3 bubble teams. That's 9 games. That's over half of your schedule is going to be versus quality to above quality opponents. There's very little cakewalks. Not only that, but to further deep dive into the schedule, our home slate is about as easy as it can get. You must win every single home game to get into the playoffs. Why? Because you may not win a single road game. Maybe one road game you may win. That is how polar opposite our home opponents are versus our away opponents. So, taking a look again at the home and away schedule, our home teams, combining all of those games together, all 9 of them, .399. That's the difficulty of our home opponents. Okay, Tennessee, Jacksonville, the Raiders, and the Dolphins. Sorry, not the Dolphins, but the 49ers. Those 4 opponents are winnable games. Okay? Then you have bubble teams like Atlanta and Miami who you could win against. Okay? You are at home, so giving us the benefit of the doubt. That would be like a touchdown favorite or a field goal favorite in our favor. It's really just Denver and Houston as our toughest opponents at home. And you could beat Houston at home. Denver, we'll see. But you could beat Denver at home. Don't underestimate the home field advantage. That leads me to our away opponents, where I said you may not win a game. Looking at our away opponents, .537 winning percentage of our away opponents. That includes Tennessee and Jacksonville on that as well. Other than our divisional opponents, playing at the Rams, at the Chargers, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Seattle. Okay, both the LA teams are in the playoffs. Kansas City's in the playoffs. Pittsburgh is in the playoffs. Houston's in the playoffs. Seattle was a borderline team. They didn't make the playoffs, but they finished the season 10-7. It's really just Houston and Jacksonville that could be your winnable road games. But we haven't won in Jacksonville in like 8 years. Whatever you want to make of that. Okay. If you took out the the Jacksonville and Tennessee games, our road difficulty goes from like .537 skyrockets all the way up to .64, something like that. That's like going against a 10-11 win team every single time on the road. That's difficult. That's difficult. And just to reverse it a little bit, if you took out the upper echelon teams that we're facing at home, so just Denver and Houston, take away those teams, our strength of schedule against the other 7 teams who play at home goes down from .39 to like .32 or 3-1 or something like that. That's like going against instead of a 5-6 win team at .399 to like a 4-win team. To make it simple, you need to win all your games at home to have a chance to get in playoffs. Because right now, it's hard for me to see, based off of if we were playing these 2024 version of these teams, where we could win more than one game on the road. Win all your games at home, and you might have a shot in get playoffs. Because it is tough sledding on the road next year. Tough sledding. The Colts got their hands cut out for them next year. You got questions about the QB, you got questions about the culture, you got questions about the GM, you got questions about your coaching staff, you got questions about the roster in and of itself. Got a lot of questions heading into 2025. And there isn't, I'm aware they're not going to fix all of those overnight. But you better grab a couple of those things and you better right those ships. Because I'm going to tell you what, this fan base ain't going to stand for this too much longer. Not going to happen. We've missed the playoffs for 3 straight years now. Or 4 straight years now, something like that. That's the tie for the longest absence from the playoffs since the Colts have been here in Indianapolis. The 88 through 92 season was the last time the Colts missed the playoffs 4 years in a row. Don't make it 5 years. This team is better than that. The last time the Colts won the AFC South was in 2014. Every other team in our division, the Texans, the Jags, the Titans, have won the division at least twice in that 10-year span. Are you serious? As bad as the Jaguars have been, the Titans have been, those two franchises have at least won the AFC South twice in the last 10 years. Meanwhile, the Colts haven't won any of that. They've sniffed around second place, basically. Because we have been the champions of mediocrity. Something needs to change. Something needs to change. I don't want to see another 8-9 season. When all your players are there, when all your players are fighting. It's going to be one hell of an offseason. And I hope and I pray it'll be a good one. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you on another episode of The Nick Solomon Show. Have a good one.